Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into the incredibly fast-paced world of medical innovation.
It really is moving quickly. New biotechnological findings, genetic discoveries, they seem to be emerging constantly.
Yeah, promising breakthroughs that, could genuinely revolutionize healthcare. It's a really exciting frontier.
Absolutely.
But here's the central challenge and sort of our mission for this deep dive. How do we actually assess these promising but often very early-stage health technologies?
And then crucially, how do we get them effectively integrated into clinical practice?
Right. Imagine a life-changing treatment just sitting on a shelf for years because our assessment methods, well, they just can't keep pace.
It's a real bottleneck.
So we're going to unpack Constructive Technology Assessment, or CTA. We want to show you how it offers a far more dynamic and impactful approach compared to the traditional methods.
It's not just about passive assessment. It's more about actively shaping the future of medicine in a way.
Exactly. The core problem, really, is that traditional health technology assessment, HTA, it struggles. It struggles immensely when the technology and its surrounding environment are constantly shifting.
It's almost designed for a static world.
Which medical innovation is definitely not.
Yeah.
So what we'll cover today is, first, why traditional HTA often falls short. Then, what CTA truly is.
And how its unique methodology works.
Yeah, and we'll bring it all to life with a really compelling real-world case study involving breast cancer treatment.
And understanding this, it isn't just for policymakers or researchers.
No, absolutely not. It directly impacts how quickly and effectively you, the patient, might receive the best new treatments available.
So it's quite relevant for everyone.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before we really dive into CTA, we need to quickly set the stage by looking at it. Officially, HTA aims for a pretty broad assessment of a technology's impact. It's supposed to consider organizational, social, economic, and ethical aspects. Sounds comprehensive, right?
Goes on paper, yeah.
But here's the rub. In practice, especially, under policy and budgetary pressures, HTA's focus often narrows dramatically.
Right. It frequently just boils down almost entirely to clinical efficacy, like, does it actually work?
And cost effectiveness. Is it worth the money?
Yeah, that broader picture often gets lost. It becomes a bit of a rigid gatekeeper.
And what's particularly illuminating here is the underlying assumption in traditional HTA. It's often unstated, but it's this stability paradigm.
The ceteris paribus idea, all other things being equal.
Exactly. It assumes both the technology and its environment remain stable during the whole assessment period.
Which, in rapidly evolving fields like healthcare, is just rarely valid, isn't it?
Not at all. Technologies themselves are constantly developing. Clinical practices shift.
Patient needs and reactions evolve. Even the legal and ethical landscape around new treatments is incredibly dynamic.
It's like trying to, photograph a Formula One race with a disposable camera from the 70s.
That's a great analogy. And this static mindset in such a dynamic world, well, it leads to some pretty significant limitations for traditional HTA.
For one, there's international evidence showing HTA results can have a surprisingly limited impact on actual implementation.
And on real-world coverage decisions, too. All that work, and it doesn't always translate into change on the ground.
Another huge issue is just the time it takes. These study periods for HTA can easily stretch to 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years, from design to publication.
Yeah, so by the time those findings are finally published, they can be completely outdated.
Right. Practitioners might have already moved on, developed their own guidelines based on much newer studies, perhaps?
It's that classic case of trying to hit a rapidly moving target with an assessment that's just too slow and fixed.
There's actually a clear example of this from back in 1991. A study by Van Rossum showed several HTA studies started by the Dutch Healthcare Insurance Board had very little visible effect.
Because of the delays.
Exactly. The findings were pretty much irrelevant by the time they came out, and this challenge became so pressing it directly influenced policy responses.
Oh, what?
Well, like the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Coverage with Evidence Development Initiative, that was around 2005.
Okay. What did that do?
It allowed for the early sort of conditional introduction of promising innovations. But here's the critical insight.
What's that?
This strategy explicitly requires new, more agile methods of technology assessment, methods that traditional HTA just wasn't equipped to provide.
So the system itself was crying out for a different approach.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that crying out, well, it paved the way for something called Constructive Technology Assessment. So what exactly is CTA and why is it so different?
Well, CTA was first described, I think, in the 1980s, initially outside healthcare, actually. But its core idea quickly resonated. Unlike traditional HTA, which often just, takes a snapshot of a technology at a fixed point.
Right, like that old camera analogy.
Exactly. CTA looks at the entire movie, so to speak. It evolved to include analysis of the design, the development, and the implementation of technology.
So the whole life cycle.
More or less. The key distinction is that CPA doesn't just assess. It specifically takes into account technology dynamics.
Okay, dynamics meaning.
It emphasizes what are called sociodynamic processes. Basically, it considers the continuous, complex interplay between the technology itself and the human, organizational, and cultural environment it's introduced into.
Ah, so how the tech and the real world interact and change each other.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the true genius of CT isn't just assessing technology, it's kind of co-creating its optimal path from day one.
So it transforms that reactive gatekeeper role.
Into more of a proactive architect of medical progress. The constructive part is crucial here.
Meaning it tries to build something better?
Yeah. CTA aims not just to evaluate, but to intentionally influence technological design and its integration into practice, hopefully in a favorable direction.
The goal being to improve quality and ultimately lead to a more effective technology that genuinely makes a difference in clinical practice.
Exactly. And this isn't about completely replacing HTA. CTA is proposed as a complementary approach.
Okay, especially for certain types of tech.
Right, especially for those promising technologies introduced at an early stage of development and maybe in a very controlled way initially. It's about moving from just, is it good enough, to how can we make it better, faster?
So how does CTA actually work in practice then? What does this dynamic view look like in its methodology? It sounds like a philosophical shift, but how does it translate?
Well, for starters, CTA has to begin early, before a new technology is even fully introduced into clinical practice.
You can't wait for it to be set in stone.
No, you need to study its dynamics right from the ground up.
Yeah.
It also cleverly uses Rogers' technology diffusion theory.
Ah, the adoption curve. Innovators, early adopters.
That's the one. It relates evaluation parameters to those different user groups: innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards.
Okay, and the insight there is?
The insight is that what you need to learn from those first few brave innovators is completely different from what you'd measure when the early majority starts adopting it.
Right. Early on, it's maybe more about refining the tech, gathering qualitative feedback.
Exactly. And later, it's more about broader impact, cost efficiency, things like that.
So the assessment itself changes over time.
Precisely. The aspects studied in CTA vary as the technology moves through these diffusion phases. It constantly reflects that evolving interaction between the technology and its environment.
And ideally, each phase transition should trigger a new evaluation, right?
Ideally, yes. The source we looked at outlines 4 main lenses or categories of aspects that CTA examines to ensure comprehensive coverage.
Okay, what are they?
First, clinical aspects. The obvious things like efficacy, safety, patient outcomes, and the overall effect on the population. Does it do what it's supposed to do?
Makes sense.
Then the economic side, primarily focusing on cost effectiveness. Are we getting, the most health benefit for our investment?
Always important.
Third, patient-related aspects, which are incredibly important in CTA. Things like social impact, ethical considerations, patient acceptability, psychological reactions, and how patient-centered the technology truly is.
So the human element.
Very much so. And finally, organizational aspects. How does it diffuse? How does it get implemented? Accessibility, equity issues. What new skills or training are needed for staff?
Wow, that is comprehensive.
It is. And the specific mix of relevant aspects isn't fixed. It's chosen based on the unique technology and its environmental interaction. It's highly adaptable. This comprehensive view is where CTA really excels.
That flexibility sounds key. And what about research method? Does it use different tools?
It definitely doesn't stick to one size fits all. It cleverly combines established methods from social sciences and health services research.
So a mixed methods approach.
Very much so. The combination of several methods, either running concurrently or in sequence, is pretty typical for a CTA.
Like what sort of methods?
Well, things like process analysis to map out workflows, patient satisfaction surveys, robust impact measurement, various forms of cost-effectiveness analysis.
Standard stuff, but maybe used differently.
Used dynamically, yeah. The source also notes that forms of action research, where researchers actively collaborate with practitioners, are particularly appropriate in those innovator and early adopter phases.
When things are still fluid and being shaped.
Exactly. Scenario methods are also often used to study these dynamic processes. They can help monitor implementation through the diffusion stages, identify needs for intermediate evaluation,
And even intentionally influence the process.
yeah, guiding it towards potentially more optimal outcomes. It's quite proactive.
And crucially, in those early adopter phases, where maybe user numbers are small and the tech use is still unstable, giving regular constructive feedback on what you're finding, say, about logistics or effects on existing guidelines, that can significantly enhance more effective implementation.
Absolutely. It's a constant loop. Learn, feedback, adapt, learn again, rather than just a single final verdict delivered years later.
Now, let's bring this to life with a concrete example, because this can sound a bit abstract.
Good idea.
Imagine a breakthrough that could save lives, just sitting there while traditional trials grind on. That's the challenge CTA was designed for. And the source details a fascinating case study, the controlled introduction of microarray analysis for breast cancer treatment.
Ah, yes, the 70 gene signature. That was a big deal.
Exactly. The technology itself. Back in 2002, a team led by Van Veer discovered this 70-gene expression profile using microarray analysis.
And it could predict survival chances in node-negative breast cancer patients better than existing factors.
Yeah, more accurately than the standard clinical and pathological factors used at the time, which was astounding.
It really was high prognostic value for distant recurrence within 5 to 10 years. That's crucial information for treatment decisions.
It tells you if the cancer is likely to come back and spread. Truly groundbreaking for personalized medicine.
And using it required quite specific handling, right? Tissue samples preserved very quickly.
Yeah, on dry ice or RNA later within just an hour, then sent to a central lab. The results, good or poor prognosis, directly help doctors guide decisions about adjuvant systemic therapy.
That's the additional treatment like chemo or hormone therapy after surgery.
Right, to reduce the risk of recurrence. So why was this specific technology such an ideal candidate for CTA?
Well, several reasons. While it was incredibly promising, offering this huge jump in predictive power, it was still very early stage.
Innovation or early adopter phase, as you said.
Exactly. Firm evidence from validation was expected, but it wasn't fully there yet in the traditional sense. And going the standard route, prospective clinical trials, would have taken at least 10 years.
A decade of waiting for a potentially life-saving tool.
Right. And the Dutch Healthcare Insurance Board, they were keen to stimulate controlled, early introduction of promising innovations like this. So it was a perfect fit for a CTA approach.
And the aim wasn't just passive assessment.
No, it was proactive to ensure and actively improve the quality of microarray implementation across different hospitals as it rolled out, hopefully accelerating its positive impact.
So how did they actually operationalize CTA in this specific case? It wasn't just a standard clinical trial, clearly.
No, far from it. They meticulously looked at a whole range of aspects: patient-centeredness, user-friendliness for the clinicians, the timing of the test within the treatment pathway.
Efficiency, efficacy, legal, ethical stuff too?
Yep, juridical and ethical aspects, safety and cost-effectiveness. But what's really insightful is how they prioritized.
How so?
Patient acceptability and the timing aspects were investigated much earlier on, while things like the full juridical and cost-effectiveness analyses were deliberately planned for later phases.
Ah, that iterative approach again. Adapting the assessment to the technology stage.
Yeah.
That's a hallmark of CTA.
Exactly. The implementation unfolded in distinct monitored phases. First, there was a preparation phase. They called it a zero-base measurement,
Okay, what did that involve?
gathering all the existing information on the microarray analysis itself and on the organizational settings in the hospitals through literature, documents, observations, interviews.
Laying the groundwork.
Precisely. They developed a clear process description of breast cancer care mapping both the before and after the microarray and created a practical guideline for effective implementation.
Then came the monitoring.
Yes, the
Yep.
crucial monitoring phase. Each participating hospital was closely observed for how they actually applied the 70-gene profile.
And if there were problems.
Any deviations or challenges were noted, and really importantly, feedback was given immediately. Real-time adjustments could be made.
Constant learning loop.
Right. Data collection was robust. Repeated measures, using documentation, observations, even tape recordings, plus in-depth interviews with both healthcare professionals and patients.
And all these insights, combined with the ongoing prospective validation of the microarray itself.
Would then feed into a comprehensive cost-effectiveness study down the line.
And how did they handle the rollout, the diffusion?
They started small, a maximum of 6 hospitals initially, acting as those innovators.
Okay.
Then the number gradually increased in subsequent stages, reflecting a more natural diffusion process into early adopter and potentially later phases.
And when does the CTA process stop?
The endpoint for the CTA measurements was defined pretty clearly. It would conclude when the technology's quality was considered optimized or its use stabilized.
Or if things went wrong?
Or if, in an extreme scenario, implementation had to be stopped due to serious concerns. This structured yet adaptive approach is exactly what makes CTA so powerful for these early-stage innovations. It really bridges that gap between discovery and widespread, effective clinical use.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for the future of medical innovation? The microarray case clearly shows CTA's huge potential, speeding up access to cutting-edge treatments. But it's not a silver bullet, right? It has challenges.
Definitely not a silver bullet.
Yeah.
There are important considerations.
Like, when is CTA actually the right approach to choose?
Well, it seems most suitable for promising technologies in those early stages, especially ones with uncertain development paths or where you expect that dynamic interaction between the tech and its environment.
Perfect for things qualifying for early or conditional coverage, where you want to learn as you go.
Exactly. Conversely, it's probably less suitable for standard drug research, which often follows classic trial designs. Or maybe when you already have robust predictive data, perhaps Bayesian methods are better there.
And it seems more suited for certain types of tech, like hardware or software.
Yeah, the source suggests it's good for hard technologies like a heart pump, mixed ones like e-consulting platforms, or even soft technologies like new quality management systems in hospitals.
Okay. What about getting doctors on board? You mentioned clinicians might prefer traditional HTA.
That's often highlighted as a major hurdle obtaining clinical commitment. Clinicians are used to focusing on clear-cut effectiveness, publishable results, that stable environment assumption.
Challenging ceteris paribus can be tough.
It can. However, CTA's approach of involving clinical teams right from the start, when uncertainties about implementation are actually high, that seems to help mitigate resistance.
Because they become part of shaping the solution.
Exactly. They're more receptive when they're involved in figuring it out.
That makes sense. Another point was objectivity. If researchers are interacting closely with clinical teams, giving feedback.
Right. That close interaction is crucial for flexibility, for understanding changes in routines. But it can also inadvertently influence clinical practice, or even the researcher's interpretation.
So how do you maintain objectivity?
The source emphasizes needing standardized measurements, verification by other researchers at each stage, especially early on when you don't have traditional control groups. It's a careful balance.
Involvement versus impartiality.
And finally, defining that endpoint. CTA logically shifts its focus as the technology moves through diffusion phases.
And stops when quality is optimized or use stabilizes.
Right. But in practice, that endpoint isn't always a sharp, clearly marked moment. It can be a bit fuzzy.
Which raises a really important question for you, the listener, doesn't it?
I think so. How do we effectively balance that imperative for speed, getting innovative treatments to patients quickly, with the absolute necessity for careful, robust assessment, especially when the landscape of medicine is constantly shifting under our feet?
That is a vital question to ponder. So, just to recap, Constructive Technology Assessment offers this powerful complementary approach to traditional HTA.
It wisely acknowledges and actively uses the inherent dynamics of technology development and implementation.
Yet it skillfully combines that need for speed with thoroughness, enabling the earlier, controlled introduction of promising innovations that can truly make a difference in patient lives.
Moving beyond just assessment to active shaping.
So, as you reflect on this deep dive, consider the profound implications of this kind of approach. How might embracing dynamic assessment methods like CTA fundamentally reshape healthcare policy?
And accelerate patient access to cutting-edge treatments in the future.
And maybe think beyond health, too. What other areas of innovation, maybe clean energy, AI, education, could benefit from a more constructive approach to technology assessment?
Interesting thought.
We hope this deep dive has given you a useful shortcut to being well-informed on this critical, evolving topic. Thank you for joining us.